Good afternoon. I'm Bob Giannino, Anson President and CEO of the United Way of Massachusetts Bay and Merrimack Valley. I also happen to be a gay man, the son of a gay woman, and the father of a 27-year-old gay son. So as you might imagine, I've lived through the joys and hardships of being an openly gay man navigating the world. And because of some of the privileges I've enjoyed in my life, my sexual orientation has had little impact on my ability to reach my goals and dreams. That said, I've experienced my fair share of bigotry, disdain, disrespect, and pain over the nearly 30 years since my coming out. And like most LGBTQIA plus Americans, I've always found ways to minimize the challenging episodes while staying focused on the promise of a better future for me and for my family, biological and chosen. I'm really grateful that you're all here today to join us in this important webinar celebrating Pride Month. As an organization, United Way is fully embedding the work of equity and justice in who we are and all that we do. Within this work, we strive to bring voice and attention to those that are marginalized by bigotry and widespread prejudice, while celebrating the important difference it makes to have people with different backgrounds, beliefs, orientations, abilities, and perspectives engaged in addressing some of the most entrenched challenges of our times. Today, we will share stories of leaders in the LGBTQIA+ community whose leadership, visibility, and bravery has and continues to demonstrate the important contributions being made by members of the queer community. The creativity, passion, persistence, compassion, and drive towards justice of LGBTQIA+ community members has enabled a tremendous slate of benefits, accomplishments, and advancements from which we all can draw pleasure and perspective. As community leaders and agents of change, we stand on the shoulders of giants who came before us, like Baird Rustin, Barbara Jordan, Barney Frank, Marsha P. Johnson, Mary Bonato, and so many others whose bravery, vision, and belief in a more equal and inclusive society paved the way for so many of the rights and freedoms we now hold today. But there is still so much work to do, because these stories also bring light to the tremendous loss we feel when members of our community's voices are extinguished out of bigotry. With specific attention to the voices lost due to the ever-present violence against trans people, specifically Black trans women, which must be stopped. This last month, our region has seen the highest rates of death and violence against Black trans women ever. In fact, we devote this webinar to Yahira D'Alto, who was murdered this month. Yahira, a devoted trans woman of color, worked tirelessly in Massachusetts for the rights and recognition of trans people, and in particular, trans youth. Her work and impact with our agency partner, Casa Mirna, is celebrated and will be recognized through donations received today as a result of this webinar, and we'll give those to Casa Mirna in recognition of her and her work. We also honor Michaela Miller of Hopkinton, whose life as a young gay woman of color ended far too soon. While these difficult realities are all too common in the LGBTQIA+ community, we at United Way and everyone assembled here today believe deeply in a world where every person is celebrated for and encouraged to be who they are authentically. Every one of today's speakers will inspire you with their accomplishments, with their passion for progress, with their deep commitment to justice for all people. It is an honor to share this virtual stage with an inspired group of leaders, and I can't wait for you to hear more about them. So let's get started with the first leader, a colleague of mine at United Way. Amanda Shabowitz, who serves as the project director for Launch, an innovative program focused on helping young people living in state-subsidized housing get a strong start on their path to a life of opportunity. Amanda, take it away.
Thanks so much, Bob, for opening the space, for powerful words, and for always leading with honesty and integrity. So for myself as a queer woman, it's so exciting to be with you all. I'm on my own learning journey. You're on your own journey. And I'm even more excited to work at a place where I can bring my full self, where our leadership brings their full selves, and where staff members are excited to engage in learning and sharing with each other. United Way has given me space not only to be myself, but to take leadership opportunities to guide our own staff's learning. Just last week, I led workshops for our staff on gender and sexuality, Pride community history, and inclusive workspace practices. At the start of those workshops, we set some intentions and ground rules for our time together. So that's what I'm going to lead you through now. First, I'd like to say that this space we create here today that you're joining us in is one of both safety and of bravery. This is a space where different points along a journey of learning and growing are encouraged and acknowledged. We're here to engage in critical dialogue through conscious questioning and active listening. This space allows people from different life experiences, backgrounds, and ideas to learn from one another, challenge themselves, and challenge biases that might be held. And we know that even as members of the Pride community, they can hold their own biases and misunderstandings of other identities. We're here to challenge all that. We're here to honor queer trailblazers who came before us and to make the road to coming out and living fully a little less hazardous for our youngest neighbors. And lastly, we're here to learn from the strength, resilience, and fierceness of our panelists and speakers today, the true purpose of our United for Justice series. I invite you to pose questions, make comments, celebrate our speakers in the chat. And in the last half hour of the webinar, Bob and our panelists will respond to any of your questions. Now, I have the honor of introducing Tammi Wortham, who will moderate our panel conversation today. If you don't know Tammi already, I encourage you to read her bio because she's remarkable, but I'll tell you a little bit. So Tammi is the Senior Vice President for Human Resources at Sun Life here in the Boston area. And we're also fortunate to have Tammi as a United Way board member. I had the pleasure of meeting Tammi over Zoom a few weeks ago. She asked all of us who were in the planning group what was important for us to get out of this webinar. And I don't know if I have the right answer, but I do now. This webinar is important to me and to all of us because I get to share space with leaders like her. So please join me in welcoming Tammi Wortham, who's an incredible community partner United Way is so proud to have with us on this journey.
Hello, everyone. I think I might be experiencing some technical difficulties. So maybe if one of my AV hosts can tell me, can you see or hear me now? You can indicate it in the chat. All right. Thank you so much. So maybe it's just me on my end. So I'm hoping this works out. I'm hoping that the pearls make you forget that there might be some technical difficulties on my end, but if not, I'm here with you. So first, before we get into what an exciting day that we have for you planned for this panel, I wanted to thank Bob and Amanda and all the United Way folks for putting together such a fantastic event for us today. Now, I know you're taking your lunch hour, probably eating right now, thinking, should I even pay attention? Of course you should. This is going to be super great today. And I want you to stick with me, right? This is a really unique opportunity to talk to unique trailblazers in the LGBTQAI plus community, our local community. So it's folks that you see at the grocery store, maybe. Not me, I don't shop anymore, you know, that is. But anyway, if you were, you might see some of the folks here today. So as you heard Amanda describe today, I am going to tell you a little bit about what an incredible group of panelists I have. So please bear with me as I formally introduce them. But later on today, we'll get into the real dirt. So let me start with the amazing Catherine D'Amato. Catherine, I'm sure they're going to bring you on screen and your fabulosity. Thank you. Catherine, bear with us. Look humble, okay? Because we're going to tell everyone how your Boston food brand. 6-year tenure, pretty fantastic. You focus on hunger and mass, and of course, nutrition and education. And also, you're committed to closing the hunger gap in Eastern Mass. You're the founder of the Hunger to Health collaboration, H2HC, developing innovative solutions to reduce the health consequences of hunger. Thank you so much for your work in this space, and I really look forward to our dialogue today. So welcome, Catherine.
Thank you.
All righty. Next, we have on our panel, drum roll please, Mr. Marty Martinez. I realize when I say that name, I always think, do I know that guy? You know what? When he comes on screen, you probably do know him, right? Marty is super impressive. I would say very busy. He already told us earlier, don't call him. He's got a lot going on. Really busy guy. No, I'm kidding. He's here for all of us, right? So Marty is the chief of the mayor's office on health and human services for the city of Boston. He oversees, get ready for this, 10 departments. I don't even know how that's possible. Marty, we'll get into how you balance that with your life. 10 departments. Boston Public Health Commission, the Office of Recovery Services, Boston Center for Youth and Families, Department of Youth Engagement and Employment, and so many more. So you are a busy man, but also you helped be a leader in the city's response to COVID-19, which focuses on access and testing and directing resources to the communities most impacted. So we're going to talk a little bit more about communities. Thank you, Marty, for your fantastic work. I'm sure I'll see you in a grocery store somewhere. All right, last but not least, okay, well, let's just say the third panelist that we have. We have James Vamboi. Do you not love that name? I love to say it. It's pretty fantastic. Look at James. He is pretty fantastic. Well, we've got Catherine, Marty, and James here with us today. But let me tell you a little bit about this man underneath right here. He is amazing. James is the chief of staff of community and culture for the Boston Ujima Project. Really, really fantastic. If you haven't done any research on it, I did. James, an amazing, amazing organization. You're originally from Philly. I did live in Philly for a few years, so we could talk about that later. We can argue about what's the best Philly cheesesteak, all right? Because honestly, people steer you in the wrong direction when you go to Philly. So you need to tell me the truth. You are a social worker, visual artist, fundraising strategist. I love it. Inspired by the work of Justice founder Baynard Rustin and your Sierra Leonean aunties. Oh, I love this part. And girl cousins who taught you all about love. Thank you for your girl cousins, right? We all got cousins. So today, as you can hear, you all have gotten a unique opportunity to interact with and hear a little bit about this amazing panel. But that's not it. A little bit later today, we have a special guest, all right? Cheryl is here. I'm not supposed to give up too much. She's going to be here with Bob a little later, Cheryl Katon, to tell you a little bit about herself, a little bit about that dialogue, but we'll let Bob handle that for later. So hold on to your seats, people. Let's get into this conversation. So thank you again to the panelists. I love it. One of the things that we saw when I was researching this event and said, what is this all about? They used the term to describe it. Thank you, United Way. Trailblazers. Hey, I don't know about you, but I don't wake up in the morning and think I'm a trailblazer. Well, okay, after I put on the pearls, maybe I think of myself as a trailblazer. But I'd like to hear from a little bit about you. Please tell us a little bit more about yourself outside of the bio and maybe who you see as trailblazers in our communities or overall communities. So I'd love to hear more about you. So Catherine, tell us more about you and also who you might see as trailblazer.
Sure. Well, I've been around Boston since '95, but I came from San Francisco and I grew up in Northern California. So, when I think about coming out at a younger age, when I look at that number, and it's been a long time ago. So I'm clearly in the era of the '70s in the San Francisco area. and in the life and times of Harvey Milk and George Moscone and what was occurring in San Francisco, which ended up very tragically, but started a movement and pushed a lot of us forward to fight and to stay involved and to be engaged. And it's where I also started as my food bank career, starting the San Francisco Food Bank in 1979. So the 70s were a great position of turning for me and brought me to Boston. But I think that the piece for me is always looking at issues of equity and fairness. And these have always been the struggles of making sure that the voices of those that are less or more quiet come forward to have the protections that we've all fought for in the generations. If you put our time together, is quite magnificent in terms of volume. I think when I come to Boston and I met Kip Tiernan, the founder of the Greater Boston Food Bank, here was this woman, that fought for the first women's shelter in Boston, and that's Rosie's Place. And that women did cross-dress as men prior to that in order to get into a shelter, because only men were permitted to come to the shelter. And so here was this gay woman who transformed a lot of things in Boston, learned a great deal from her. So in terms of Kip. In San Francisco, there were just so many, Harvey being one of them, in terms of people that just caused and affected change and such sadness. And there's just incredible leaders and motivators today that I've learned from along my life. So I'll leave it there and love to hear from others.
I can go, if it's helpful. Hi, my name is James. Again, hi everyone. Super excited to be here. Really appreciate United Way for inviting me into this space. As Tim mentioned, I'm the Chief of Staff of Community and Culture with the Boston Ujima Project. I didn't mention actually what I do in my bio, but I actually manage our partnerships and just operations stuff, as well as manage our participatory planning work, which is critical to our effort. But yeah, I just to give y'all a little bit about me, I've been in this game for a minute. I went to college for political science. I think I've sort of always, I grew up in an African home, as mentioned earlier. My family's from Sierra Leone. I have always been, I don't know, I guess people have always identified me as queer. I think one of the most clear indicators that people have often said to me growing up was the fact that I used to hang out with girls a lot. To this day, I still hang out with girls because I think women and femmes are the better people. But I feel just like growing up, because of that, I think I sort of always stood out, and I've always sort of been in opposition to sort of the expectations of what it means to be a man. And I think because of that, I think I've always been attracted to conversations that are disrupting systems that and so just my mom worked with folks with intellectual disabilities, and so similarly always was out here advocating and supporting for those folks, and so just I don't know, I guess when I think about just who I am, I think I am someone who I'm an organizer. I think I'm a queer African man who I think has, because of my circumstances, has observed this world to not have enough space for me and people that look like me. And so I think I've sort of just continued to move in a way that offers another opportunity, another way to exist. And I think that's sort of what has led me to do work in organizing around with feminists. I do a lot of feminist men's work, but also just supporting Ujima, which is, imagining a new way of being in partnership with each other, of resourcing our communities, and building building a community that we want, that's determined and informed by us exclusively. And so I think that, I've always sort of just wanted to be in the world that I feel like we deserve. And so I think I've sort of just always showed up in that way. So yeah. And trailblazers. Yeah, I was thinking about this. a bit. And to be honest, you know, I honestly just like think a lot about the queer folks and like some of my best friends in high school that like were just a bit more like that were more open and honest about who they were before I was. I often think about them. You know, I think about James Baldwin. I think about DeRay McKenton as just like other like Black queer writers, builders. And I feel like for me, when I think about the people that resonate the most and just who I look up to the most are the folks who I'm like closer to, who are my who are my community, and who I'm able to get a better understanding of like who they are and what they believe in. And so I feel like they're just like my homies around the way. And so, yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Tammi, for leading us, and it's a pleasure to be here with both James and Catherine and everyone that's joined us today. You know, again, my name is Marty Martinez, as the run Health and Human Services for the City of Boston, and spend pretty much every day thinking about how we break down barriers for our neighbors, for those who need access to opportunities and resources here in the city. And that's been my work, which has seen some of the highest times of my professional career, and some of the most challenging as well, as we think about the struggles we've been through over this last year and a half, and the fact that we're virtual when we really want to be together and connected. When I think about Trailblazers, for me, you know, I think about my first days here in the city of Boston. I've been in Boston about 22 years. And the first organization that I ever worked for was an organization dedicated to and started by gay Latinos. The Latino Health Institute was the organization that I worked at when I first got here as an outreach worker. I came for graduate school. I didn't know a single soul in this city. I had never been here before. I'm not even sure I knew where Boston was. But I came here to go to graduate school, and I met gay Latino leaders who were fighting a system that was not made for them, who were creating pathways for young LGBTQ youth to connect and get the services they need, and to be able to ensure that they were done in their language and done culturally competent and done in a way that was going to give people access. And so for me, those trailblazers, there are many of them. There are many Latino leaders that you know showed me that it was work that I could do when I got here, and it was work that I could be a part of when we think about all the things that we want to do in our community. And so I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that when I stepped into the city, I could understand how to have both pieces of my identity as a gay man, but also as a Mexican American. You know, I didn't know I was Latino until I got to Boston. I was Mexican when I grew up. That's my identity. That's where I was raised. I was Chicano, which for me meant, you know, activism and pushing against so many things. And so for me, that coming here and realizing both of those identities were important has shaped my life experience and where I've been. And I think the other piece I'd just share for me is, as I think about the fact that I sit here today with all of you, I'm in City Hall, you know, part of leadership of our city, and proud of the work that we do, and am challenged by it every day. But my identity shapes how I think about this work. My identity shapes how I think about what's impacting young LGBTQI youth of color, specifically in our community, how we think about the issues that we face and the work that we need to do to strengthen those lives. So I may be an openly gay man that sits in leadership circles and at board meetings and is able to make decisions, but I haven't lost, and I will never lose, that frame, that lens that I bring with me as a gay man of color. And I think that's probably what helps me make the greatest change that I can make, is that I bring that experience with me to every conversation I have on every issue that I work on. So I'm excited to be here and eager for this conversation. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Marty. Great job describing everyone on the panel. I hope you guys can hear me. hear something in the background? A little bit of noise? All right. Thank you so much for your time. They were really fantastic and getting a chance to get to know you all a little better. So to piggyback a little bit on what Marty said, I'd love to hear from James and Catherine. How has your identity influenced your leadership and approach on career development? Now, I'm having a little bit of a delay on my end, so why don't we start with Catherine, and then we'll have James right after. But I hope that you could hear the question okay.
Sure.
Catherine, we'll start with you.
Sure. What I heard you say is how has these influenced, your career? When I had to make a decision, and then for many younger or people who are just coming out, again, in the late 70s, I had to choose between my family and the person that I loved, the woman that I had fallen in love with. And I didn't see my family for a long time. So I think that was something that stayed with me in terms of no one should be in that position to have to choose. And it reflects very much in my work today. You shouldn't have to choose between, feeding your family and paying your mortgage or your rent, or choose to put clothes on the backs of your children and food. So there's always this choice. So I think that became a very instrumental piece about my work. I would also say that the issues around my family values, which surprisingly were contrary when I came out, but they eventually did all come around for acceptance and being who you are, and being able to fight for that. And when I was able to start the San Francisco Food Bank, I learned a lot, because it was towards the end of the 70s when we had seen, an end of a war in Vietnam, the rise of the Black Panther Party, and children being fed in Oakland, being fed breakfast. Wow, there's a novel idea, which then went on to be our school breakfast program. You had abduction of Patty Hearst. You had the People's Temple, so many members taking their lives, and I worked for the Council of Churches. So again, it was a unusually amazing time. And I've tried to take those things with me forward, that to listen to people, to try to bring as much justice and to much equity. And whether that be economic, like starting what is now the Horizons Foundation as one of the original incorporators in San Francisco, which seems amazingly, I'm an old soul now when I look back and see how long it's been there. But I think you can carry those things to open doors so that people have opportunity, whether it be access to resources, education, food, housing. It all fits for me. And all of that, as being an open lesbian, openly gay lesbian, for my colleagues and workers, I hope it creates a safe place for people to want to come and be a part of, and to join either the food bank or to be who they are. And watching that cultural shift go through, not just as one openly gay person in an organization, but many, and many teaching us now along the way, which is pretty amazing. So I bring it every day. I think Marty said it well. You bring that perspective into your day, but you don't always lead with it. I don't, when I had a child, I didn't go up to his friends and give out my hand and, to meet their parents, say, hi, I'm Mario's mom, I'm gay. What I tried to do was understand what he needed. And so I'll leave you with a piece of humor. I remember when he was going to high school, and I said, Mario, you're going to high school, you're in a different place, I'm really respectful of you. And he's like, that's okay, Mom. Everybody knows you're gay. In fact, it's rather cool. And I'm like, really? We have come that far, right? That it's cool in Brookline. Yeah, he said, yeah, it's very cool in Brookline. So, I think as you bring forward the opportunity to teach a child, to share resources, to provide fairness, that's an important thing for me. I do it all the time.
Cool. Yeah, I similarly, I really resonate with Catherine's point earlier about choice. And similarly, when I came out, it became clear to me that it was important for me to be happy, and for me to figure out a way to thrive. And so I think when I think about my own like leadership journey, and just like how my identity has influenced that, I think moving to Boston was actually a huge step in that decision. I think coming to Boston exactly, I think there was just more clear path. There were more, to me, it felt like there were more visible affirming pathways to like spaces of safety for being, and not that, I don't think Boston's like this gay haven. I think nationally, I think it has this perception as being a leader in protecting LGBT folks. And I think coming to Boston was like critical to me, I don't know, understanding myself as a professional. And I also just want to add to the question earlier around trailblazers. I just want to bring in Quincy Roberts and Corey Yarborough, who were leaders of the Hispanic Black Gay Coalition. I definitely feel I have a lot of respect and love for them for creating space for Black and queer youth, and definitely felt like that was a space that I needed in just like anchoring myself in the city, because there hadn't really been any space when other than the space that they had curated. And so I do think just like for me having a community was like critical to me feeling grounded and safe and comfortable. I would say that also, in addition to just like how I think I just became really, and it sounds really cheesy, but I think as I grew, I just like started to love myself and started to demand that I be in more spaces where people loved and appreciated me. And I think the social sector, in particular, nonprofit sector, which is where I mostly have had my career, I have found that there have generally been people who have been like receptive and open to seeing me fully. And I think even coming into these spaces, I've been really clear about like, this is all that I am and like, this is what it is. And like, y'all need to get with it. And so I think I've become really, unapologetic about sort of just like how I move as a professional and don't see it as any, issue. And I think that I try to really exemplify that in the communities that I'm in. So for example, at the Boston Ujima Project, another trailblazer I'll just throw into is Nia Evans, who's the ED of the Boston Ujima Project. I definitely look up to her a lot. She's a Black queer woman out here leading a really ambitious organization that is doing something different. And she does it with such insight and determination and commitment. And I think that and like listening and like really, I think when you think about community work, I'm always looking at people that like listen. And when I think about just my own leadership development, and so being part of her team has been phenomenal. But I just think about as I like move forward, I think I definitely just look to ensuring that I'm like that, and I'm like ensuring that other people can have space to be themselves. And I think that that has grounded me, that has made me feel like part of the work. And I'm hoping that, I hope I continue to show that with like how I dress, with the things I don't do and don't say, with how I welcome people into space, how I develop relationships. I think these all play a role in just sort of our ability to be leaders. And so I guess, I think I would leave it there.
So I'm jumping in because Tammi is having some technical difficulties. She'll hopefully be back on screen shortly. So I'm going to ask the next question, and hopefully it will not be one that throws you off your mark a little bit. But I'd love, I think this is particularly directed towards Marty and then Catherine. I'd love to get a sense of the role that you feel like you play in making space for, setting example for the next generation of queer leaders in our city, in our region. Not James, not that you don't have a role in that, but you're one of them. And so, Marty and Catherine, can you share a little bit about some of the intention that you bring to that particular role or responsibility that I feel like I have, and I'm sure you feel like you do as well?
Yeah, I can share a little bit of that. Thanks, Bob. I think every day, when you think about the work that you do, you sort of think about how, you are building upon the work that others have already done. And I think about that all the time. I think about the shoulders that I stand on and the work, who's paved the way before us, and how we're standing on the shoulders of those who broke down barriers that we then live the benefit from, right? So as a man that's, in his 40s, I'll say, as a man who's in his 40s, for me, I know the barriers that were broken down, and I'm proud of that. And I'm proud of all the work that people did before me and grateful for it. But it translates then into how am I helping to pull people along? How am I doing that work? And I think that's important, right? I mean, as a city official in the role that I'm in, but as a nonprofit leader before that, folks have come to me to explore, their own careers. People have come to me to talk about how they can think about their own identity and how it plays itself out, both professionally and personally. And I think it matters. I think it's an important part of how we think about how we approach ourselves and how we approach some of the challenges that are there. I very openly, as I'm sure others do, I talk about my husband. I talk about being gay. I talk about that in settings, not just on a pride celebration, but I talk about it on cabinet meetings. I talk about it when we're talking about issues in our community and how we think about violence and how we think about human services, because I think it's really important that people feel safety in that. So for me, I think that's part of the conversation. That's part of the work that we have to do. And so when younger LGBTQ leaders come to me to not only express questions they have, but issues they're pushing, things they're trying to make better, I think it's important that we not forget the pathway that was created for us as we try to create that pathway for others. And so I think I have a responsibility. I think that's also true for me, the intersectionality. I think about the same way when I think about Latino leaders in our city. And I think about younger Latinos organizing and working and pushing. And I think about what the role that I have to play. So I don't think it's an option. For me, I feel like it's a necessity. Because I know people did it for me, and I'm grateful for that. And I know I have that responsibility to do it for them. So that's how I think about the role that I'm trying to play, and being conscious of it every day.
I agree. I've always enjoyed these conversations and worked with Marty on a few of them. And I think that, be able to support people for where they are, who they are, but also be honest about who you are. I remember standing in front of my team several years ago, and I remind them of it. I would say, look, I'm an imperfect human being. Okay, you're not going to get in. I can't do everything that you want me to do. We'll probably get to a lot of things that you would like to do, but you have to also learn about how to manage, a $200 million corporation, and so there's certain things we have to do. But I think that affirming, especially younger people, that it is their time, right? And part of being a sagey older lesbian is to move on and is to help and to make way for that, and that everybody has gifts to offer, and that piece is really important to be able to acknowledge. And I've often said to members of my team, and when I think of my 25 years at the Greater Boston Food Bank, there have been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that have come through the organization, and I always say to them, look, if you have an opportunity, I'm going to be the first one to shake your hand and say, bravo, this is great, and how can I help you get there? Because I had a choice to stay at the food bank, but you don't have to stay here for 25 years. You have your life ahead of you. You have a lot of great opportunities in front of you. What do you want to be? So I think that helping people see that, and that they can be, who they are. I mean, obviously there is still hatred. There is still, intense discrimination, and there is intense, hostility that can show itself in the workplace. But there is also support and guidance and honesty and encouragement and to move on. I mean, I remember when, I mean no disrespect to anyone that might be voted for President Trump on this call, but I remember when a young gay man came into my office after the election, and he came in and he said, "Can I talk to you?" And I'm like, he's like, "Catherine, I don't know what to do. I don't know if I can go home to my parents for Thanksgiving. I just don't know what to do. I don't know how to talk to them." And we probably spent an hour just having the conversation of, wow, you're right. Let's talk about it. And there is no right answer of how you approach a difficult situation with your family and people you love. But you don't love this, but you do love them. And how do you piece that together and stand still as who you are? So I think that the space is really important. But I also think it's important to call out when it's not right? Or how to learn, how to make an observation. We've done a lot of reverse mentoring at the food bank, which I have found incredibly helpful. And it hasn't just been, an LGBTQI person to the same. It can be any situation, but I think it demystifies a great deal that we are human and that we are imperfect, but that we can be helpful. And I would just say the listening is really important. And as a leader, I have learned so much from people when they come and bring a problem that they're experiencing. And then I'm aware that, okay, that's broader. And this is true for folks coming out of our community. How do they make their way? How do they? And I think they're full of incredible talent and incredible possibilities. And I'll just leave it with what Marty said too about being able to speak about your life. This is who I am. I'm married. I have a kid. I remember when I have a child that's 34, and I had a child, with an unknown donor, right? And I would get comments like, "Well, where's your husband?" And this was before marriage, right? I'd be like, "There is no husband." And they'd be like, "Well, what do you mean there's no husband?" I'm like, "There's never been a husband, okay? Let me tell you how this happened." And then you just tell and you move on. and we keep going. And then sometimes it drops there and that's the over. And then sometimes people go, "Oh, wow, I never thought about that. That's amazing. How did that? Tell me how you did that." And, when you can have, in my life as an Italian American, when I had a child and I went home with my son Mario for the first time, the women were in one room and the men were in the other room, and all the women wanted to hear the story. And you know what their conclusion was? "We don't care if you're gay or straight, because you know what? They didn't help us anyway. Good for you. Good for you for having that baby, because that's what you want." And so you get what you're looking for, but it may not ever be necessarily the way you were looking for it. So for me, I think affirming, keep the conversation going, encourage people to grow. And if it means moving through the organization to another opportunity, so be it, and be there for them. That guidance is amazing and important for them.
Such great words. And I want to give James the last word, and it's tacked to something, Catherine, that you talked about, which is the idea of reverse mentoring, right? So I asked you all sort of, about the role that you play with new and just recently coming out young people. James, what's your advice to folks like me or Catherine and Marty, those of us that are a little bit more, along in our careers, about how we can, we can be led by you and your generation as this work continues?
For sure. Yeah. I think this might be relevant to what Catherine was saying. I think relationships are really important. And I think when it comes to like leadership, I'm always like really hesitant to like glorify any leader because I'm just like, oh no, leadership is always so complicated. And I think some of the most valuable things you learn about leadership and all the sort of like nuances to it, I think you learn in relationship with people. And so I think for me, I'm always just trying to think about like, how can we be in better relationship with each other? And, because I think, when I think about myself as a role model, I think, I don't know, maybe what as you guys think about being role models, I think people who observe us can have a certain idea or perspective on like what it is for us to lead in this capacity, in this circumstance. And I feel like that's almost always like incomplete. And so I feel like for me, I feel like the work is really just figuring out how do we connect as people that are of different generations. How do we try to be in the same space with each other to have conversation? How do we learn about each other to be able to offer sensitive insight and feedback? I don't know. I feel like there's ways in which by age we're, I think in the work we can be, I don't know, segregated and just like really, I don't know, maybe ages argue about just like how we think about knowledge. And so for me, I think that my suggestion is for us all to just like lean in to like, and I don't mean to like use this like, but just to sort of like pay attention to folks and to collaborate. And I think also like being thoughtful about like that doesn't happen instantly, right? It might take time. I think something that I'm always after, and I think philanthropy is a big culprit of this, is just like forced partnerships and forced like coalition building and whatever. And I think sometimes things take time, and I think that's like fine. And so just creating enough space and runway for that, but being intentional and about it, I think is a really important practice.
Right on. Well, thank you, James and Marty and Catherine for spending a little bit of time with us on this panel. We're going to come back towards the end of our time together and take questions from our audience and continue the dialogue. And I just want to make sure that I thank Marty Martinez for joining us. I know, Marty, you have another engagement starting at 1 o'clock, but having you here for this first hour was so tremendous, and I want to thank you for joining us. We're going to transition to a conversation that I had the pleasure of having just a few weeks ago. Earlier this month, I had the opportunity to connect with a tremendous leader in our community. Cheryl Katon serves as the Vice President of Resource Development and Volunteer Engagement at Fenway Health. And she has very publicly and bravely shared her journey as her transition to a woman over the last number of weeks and months. And I had an opportunity to talk with her a little bit about what that has been like. And I look forward to sharing now this video with you all. Cheryl, thank you so much for spending some time with us today to share a little bit about your journey and what a journey it has been.
Thanks, Bob. I'm really glad to be here. Thanks for asking me.
I have to tell you that it was just truly amazing to bear some witness from outside, watching the reactions of so many to the story of your journey and of your transition. Can you share a little bit about the letter that you wrote and how you were feeling when you sort of pressed send and posted some of that originally?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it wasn't news to me. So obviously I had been living this story for such a long time. And really, I probably knew my whole life that at some point this day was going to come and I was going to make my gender transition. I never really knew how or why or when or what would be those pieces. So I felt like I was very, very prepared. But I also knew that lots of folks that I work with, folks that I socialize with, while I had been out to a number of them, I had, because of my job and because of just the life that I live, I knew there were hundreds and hundreds of people who in social media who were going to say, oh my God, I had no idea that was coming. So I thought I would take the moment and the time when everybody was sort of caught off guard by, oh, Cheryl is apparently Cheryl, and that's a whole thing, to then utilize that as a opportunity to educate and tell my story so that people could relate that to other trans folks that they might know, or frankly, anybody else who has a big change in their life. I think it's a very, so I'm happy to put it out there for folks, and for that reason, so folks can learn from it and grow. Helps me too.
You've already shared how this isn't sort of a flip of the switch kind of moment. It truly is a journey and an evolution that starts with sharing your journey with people who are closest to you, and then slowly over time. What was the point at which that moved you to finally say, like, I need to be full in my authentic self, to be who I am, for everyone to see who I am? What led to that sort of ultimate, coming out, if you will, or sharing of your story, if you will?
I think like I said, I always knew that the day would sort of come at some point. And I think that my coming out probably begins at age 16. So I was very slow. The very first person I came out to was actually my best friend in scout camp as a kid. And he was wonderful about it, really patient with me, and let me go through that emotional story. We were 16-year-old camp staff counselors in the, whatever, and just telling him that whole thing. But anyway, from that moment to age 52, I had been slowly working my way there, and I continued to crave a more full life for myself, and I would volunteer more and more so that I could give back, but also so that I could experience this life, and I would be on weekends, and because when I'm volunteering and I'm putting my leadership out there for the trans community, that means there's joyful successes, there's hard work, there's frustration and conflict, and those are all real emotions. And I wanted to experience those real emotions as my real self. And as I experienced them more and more over the course of years, I was like, yeah, this is how I need to experience life. So it was an evolution. There wasn't really a watershed moment of like, okay, today's the day. It did become clear to me probably over the past 2 or 3 years. And then you got to put the logistics in place. Like, okay, how is everybody going to deal with that? How do I actually present? Like, what's the story? And then the logistics drive a little bit of the, this is the day sort of thing.
So powerful to hear you talk about that, those different steps of the journey. And one of which you touched on was the role that sort of friends and allies and folks who accept your story and your who you are, and it started so early with you at 16 having someone like that. Can you talk a little bit about your allies and your advocates? Who are some of the folks that have been there for you along the way, and what advice might you have for others that are put in the position to be allies and advocates, and how they can be best at that?
Yeah. Well, allies and advocates are enormous part of the process. I feel like, and it depends on your age and your generation and all that stuff. But for me, I felt like there were lots and lots and lots of years and tons of interactions that the world said, don't do that. That's not right. That's not the way you're supposed to be. Right. And so every time an ally says, I hear you, I see you, I love you for who you are, that sort of offsets those moments where don't do that. That's not the right thing. You're not supposed to be that way. And so it takes a lot of those allies to help you have that courage to be like, okay, like I know that person's got my back. I know that person can see the real me regardless of how I present. And so I can present as I am, and they'll love me either way. And for me, like I said, it was a long, long time. So it was really hundreds of people over probably 30 plus years of me telling 1 or 2 people this year, and 3 or 4 people that year, and 5 or 6 people this year, and just growing this sort of allied army of support that I was like, okay, these people are all going to be with me, and I'm ready to sort of go the rest of the distance. But I see you, I hear you. Like, that's the thing. You said, like, ask for advice. Like, it's like, just see them and hear them for who they are. And after that, once you say, I love you, I see you, I hear you, then your own relationship with that person will sort of guide you, and who you are. Is they trust you to tell you their story. They trust you for a reason. You are already a good ally. That's why they trust you. And your instincts will take you the rest of the way.
That's such amazing advice. And, you know, as a gay man myself who has had to at times rely on allies to help me move forward, you know, what you're pointing out is, you know, allyship is not that much different when it comes to being an ally for the trans community as it might be for our, you know, gay and lesbian, you know, friends and colleagues, our Black and brown, our other folks who need allyship. It is about, you know, hearing, seeing, you know, allowing folks to be their full and authentic selves, and allowing your relationship to really navigate and guide that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the weight of the ally role is definitely something to be loved and respected. I remember in my 20s telling my then allies, which we didn't really use those terms, they're just friends. Right. And I would say, like, I am compelled, I need to live more life. I want to go in public. I want to do this. I want to do that. Will you be seen with me? You know, because who knows what that means for you? People are going to be like, why is this straight guy hanging out with this trans, whatever they would have called me back then in the you know 80s and 90s? And these wonderful allies, these guy friends, macho guys, like, sure, happy to help you. What do you want to do? We'll go out and have dinner. We'll go shopping. What do you want? So I love those memories so much. And I think about how brave they were to be with me. You know, obviously, nowadays it's a little bit better. At least it's better for certain folks who are trans, and I'm certainly lucky to be one of them. But it's an amazing, amazing strength.
Oh, that's so heartwarming to hear you talk about those friendships and how they navigated you through this. You know, sometimes our first allies are our parents, and I wonder whether you have thought at all about the role of parenthood in guiding and helping children, young people navigate their own gender identity journey, and whether you have any thoughts or advice for parents that might be experiencing, you know, hearing this from their children for the first time.
It is super tough. I know, as a parent myself, you know, you end up, it's a human nature thing. You have this visual of your kid, of what their successful life is going to be like, and you have it in this, like, you don't mean to do it, but it's just sort of human nature. You give them sort of this, you don't like say, like, you're going to live in this house and you're going to have this job. I mean, that would be crazy. But you do have this sort of, I hope they have this type of a life. And then when your kid says, Mom, I'm trans, Dad, I'm trans, then all of those things that you thought for them feel like they have all suddenly broken down. But really, as a parent, the reason you visualize that sort of future for your kid is because you're visualizing the outcome of those things. Those are just sort of manifestations. Those are like, what you really want is your kid to be happy and healthy, self-sufficient, all those things that you want them to be, you know, stand on their own 2 feet, that stuff. And being trans, they can achieve all that stuff. They just need you to be with them during that time. And when you let go of the idea of, like, oh, I thought my son was going to be this, and I thought my daughter was going to be that. I thought my son was going to be happy, and I'm going to help my child be happy. I'm going to help my child be, you know, well-adjusted and independent. And then it becomes easier for the parent as well.
That's such helpful advice. I remember, you know, my own son coming out as gay, and even myself as a gay man having some of those same moments of dread. You know, dread is the best way that I can say it, because I knew some of the challenges that I went through. But you're right, when you anchor it in, what you want is ultimate happiness for your children. It just sort of comes it comes to light that's
so funny. One of your kids is gay. One of my kids is trans. That's great.
Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh. That might have to be a whole other conversation at some point that we might be thinking about having. One of the things when we talk about kids, I've been so fascinated at is the degree to which we see so many young people embracing their gender identity or true gender identity. Can you talk a little bit about the difference across generations that you've seen, given your own experience and given what you're seeing young people navigating today?
Sure. It's a fascinating topic. When you think about what I said before, like you have all these interactions, right, throughout your entire life that sort of tell you how to live. And kids who are trans or non-binary or gender non-conforming today have far less of those, and they feel they can express themselves far earlier, or at least some kids in some situations. And then, of course, that's what folks are that are 30 and 40 years younger than me, and folks that are 20 and 30 and 40 years older than me, they had an entire life that said, don't do this. And there was never a window for them, or rarely a window for them to be themselves. And so the difference in the way they navigate life is enormously different. So the folks who are older are extraordinarily brave if they came forward and transitioned, and they did it at a time where that was totally not something that ever happened. And that impacts who they are or informs who they are. Or they stayed in the closet, which also informs who they are. And they have a whole different view of themselves and a whole different view of society. Kids today, if they have a supportive environment and they feel like they can share it, they share that stuff early. If they're supported, all of a sudden they have that experience then informs their expectation of what the world is supposed to be like. So those two enormously different experiences change the language, change the way they think about each other, changes the way they think about the trans community. I love being in the middle between those two generations. It really is a fascinating space to have friends and associates who are in their 20s and friends and associates who are in their 70s, all that are trans and have just wildly different views of each other and of the whole community.
That is so incredibly powerful, and it speaks to this, what those earliest experiences are with what it means to come out, what it means to share your story, and how powerful those initial interactions are. And Cheryl, I just have to thank you for being willing to join us, to share your story, to bring us your perspectives. It's such a powerful opportunity to hear from someone who's been such an important leader in our community and will continue to be in ways that will be even more authentic and even more well-connected. And I can't thank you enough for sharing that with us.
Bob, thank you so much. And thanks for your leadership with United Way and making this a topic of discussion through your platform. I really appreciate the ability to share my story, or the willingness for you to let me share my story. Thanks.
Oh, you bet. Thank you so much. An incredibly powerful dialogue, and I hope that you had an opportunity to hear it despite some of the video challenges with the interview itself. I just was blown away by the journey that Cheryl was on. We're going to bring back Catherine and James, and also invite Cheryl to join us here. And hopefully our technical difficulties will have subsided. We'll play this question and answer period by ear. And I'm just waiting for my fellow panelists to join me here. I don't see anyone, so I'm going to improvise a little bit. Here we go. There's Catherine and Cheryl and James. Terrific. We, as I mentioned before, Marty Martinez had to leave for another engagement, and unfortunately, we were hoping to bring Tammi Wortham back to join us here, but we but we unfortunately, technical difficulties got the best of Tammi, and so we're grateful for her joining us and participating, and I'm sure she's listening in at this point. So I'm going to get us started as we curate any questions from our audience, and I'd ask our audience to please share questions through the portal, and we'll collect those and share them around. I guess, Cheryl, I'd love to start with you a little bit and give you an opportunity to speak live. And I guess if it's okay, if I might ask, this is your, and please correct me if I'm wrong, this is your first Pride Month living as a trans woman. Openly as a trans woman, I should say.
Yeah.
Is that right?
I wouldn't say that. I mean, I
That's
have
okay.
participated
I
in
was
Pride
hoping
for
that you would
years.
correct me if I was wrong.
Yeah.
So please, yes.
And I would present just like this. The difference is I was bi-gender is the term that I would use back then. So I lived a full life. I allowed my male identity to live a full life. But over the course of my life, I was like, okay, I'm sort of done with the bi-gender identity, and I'm going to live exclusively in my female presentation.
Thank you for that. To Catherine's point earlier, we're all continuing to learn a little bit and navigate some of these issues, even if they're particularly close to us.
Right.
And so, do you feel anything different about this Pride Month because of that fullness that you're leading now as your as a woman?
Yeah. Actually, one other thing I wanted to talk about, the word transition, like in our video and in our whole thing, like in a lot of times we will actually use the terms emerge, and contextually, like we don't really change, so we don't really transition. We just let the other identity emerge in a more full way. And it's really the people around us who transition. When you think about the people who change, it's everybody who's like, oh, I used to refer to you as this name, and now I refer to you as Cheryl. That's where the change is. Me? I'm always.
That's excellent. I just have to comment. I think that's excellent, and that's a really just wonderful example of the evolution of the context.
Right.
Context, right? Again, from transsexuals, whatever that was, and again, in my era of growing, and then how to move through gender identity and a spectrum. And again, I just find it amazing. And Cheryl, I think I remember the first time I met you. Did we meet at a Fed event? We were sitting at a table together, and you were talking about funding your organization. And I said, oh, let's talk about the Equality Fund. And we just happened to be sitting next together. It was completely just serendipitous. And then you said, oh, I know you, Catherine. We volunteer at the food bank. And then I went back and I saw this trans organization volunteering at the food bank with this incredible, I said, how did I not know this? And in a matter of like 10 minutes, we had about 10 connections.
Absolutely right.
Awesome. It was just awesome. So great to hear your story fully. Thank you.
And I remember that. I remember that conversation so well. And I remember that, we've been a few times, but it's one of those moments where bringing folks who are trans, who are dealing with how they want to present into a real life situation that does good for others, but does good for them as well. And the Greater Boston Food Bank is one of our sort of go-to events every year that we can.
Yeah, awesome.
That's so powerful, and it sort of drawed out one of the questions that I hadn't asked the panel earlier. So maybe I'll bring it back now, which is the, how our identities intersect with the other parts of our lives. The intersection between our genders, the intersection in our workplaces. Maybe we can talk about sort of how being gay intersects with other parts of our lives, and where we find that to be sort of the most easy to navigate, and maybe some of the more difficult places to navigate that. And anyone that would like to jump in and get us started on that conversation.
I mean, my personal life, it's very, I'm talking to you from Provincetown. I mean, it's just like heaven, so, but it's also during COVID, it was also, issues around, violence or relative to anger and people coming through town with Confederate flags and calling people out. And just as you could still see the hatred, right? You can't be protected, right? Necessarily from the hatred that is a part of our world. I think that the building those networks, but what I do find is that there's more connectivity, right? And I think that the DEI work that's occurring and the connection of the intersectionality that's occurring, and that the racial equality, inequality, and that big word inclusion has just, it's been amazing to watch it. I mean, again, some of us are old enough to feel like deja vu all over again from the 70s, the 80s, and whenever you were fighting for something early on in your life. But I find when I can see Tammi here as a corporate leader, when I can see you, Bob, when I can see, Marty, when I can see all of us more from the corporate side, present, talking, educating, listening, learning, that's a change, right? We can find our havens of safety and places where we can have, dinner with our friends, and then, as Cheryl knows well, then have to go back and be something else with somebody, in the corporate life. When that begins to be a part of that work and life, I mean, it isn't work and home. It's home is work, and COVID taught us that. So now there is this just incredible, there's not a big difference in a lot of ways. And the fact that we can keep teaching, keep coaching, keep training, keep sharing, keep kind of blowing people's brains out every once in a while because they go, boom, I had no idea. Right. Oh, now I get it. Epiphanies occurring are a good thing. And so for me, they're very interconnected. I am at core, who I am as a human is what I bring into my work. And if we can have the wherewithal in those work environments to be able to be who we are and to have that be embraced, or to use Cheryl's word, to have it emerge, then in a place that is safe and welcoming, then that is pretty incredible. And I see more of that. I think there are probably plenty of stories where that is not the case. We have so many trans youth, emerging youth on the streets of Boston and elsewhere that have been tossed out by their families. So it's happening still. So how do we help them? And the hatred, especially the numbers on trans Black women are suicide and murders are unbelievable. So it is still there. So for me, they're very interconnected.
Yeah, just to jump in here myself, really appreciate this question, and was one of the things I'm most proud, I'm the proudest about myself is that I'm both African and I'm queer, and to this day, that's in this moment that's still a revolutionary act, right? It's still pretty humongous to openly queer and probably African. And so for me, when I think about just like what that has meant for me, it has meant like some of the best, most exciting moments, and sometimes some of the hardest. I grew up in Philadelphia, Southwest Philadelphia, in a Sierra Leonean West African home. And I don't know, I guess I feel like I didn't see anyone that was African and gay. And I think for me, when I think about just sort of like what that means for me in this moment, is for me to really try to live like honestly and free. And also just like and unapologetically, I think it's really it has at times been unsafe for me to be openly who I am when I'm in certain family settings and situations, and I continue to like show up and announce not only just who I'm dating and all the boyfriends I have, but also the work that's happening in our community. You know, I think when I think about this question around like, safety and like, you know, what does it mean to be both queer and something else? You know, I think for me, I'm in this unique place. I'm in this unique place where I'm a first generation African American who has like deep ties to both to folks in diaspora that are on the continent and folks that are living here in the U.S. and who have a very Western reality. And I think for me, when I think about, as you guys have known and probably hear about all the ridiculous sodomy laws that are, you know, impacting, killing, hurting folks all around the world. I think for me, as like someone who has the privilege to be open and honest and without concern of like safety, or for me to really model what it could be for my cousins, my little folk, for my little nieces, to at least have some reference for them to attach themselves to. And so, yeah, I think that this place, this position that I guess that I'm in is one that I think I take with the utmost responsibility, and I like try to really anchor on like on love and the opportunity to connect and relate with people in pursuit of that. So yeah, I'll offer that.
I'm back. Okay. I had lost you all for a second, and now I'm back. I can see. So we thank you, James, for that and for the example that you're setting in that. We've got a couple of questions from audience members. The first is from Tamara Oliver. And so her question is that she's a queer woman on our corporate D&I
go ahead. Yeah, I think can you take it, Cheryl?
Sure, I'll take a start at this and sort of see what we want to sort of uncover. And I think that the question really goes to, how do we take care of ourselves and do self-care when we are representing and doing this diversity and inclusion work, which really can be an emotional strain on folks. And the one thing that I've really found is sort of a team approach. And this is, and again, it's just sort of my solution that works for me. I'm really comfortable because of my personal background and my bi-gender identity and all that stuff. I'm really comfortable helping folks and meeting them where they are when they are really new on their personal self-reflection inclusion journey. And then as they move forward, there's a lot of other aspects of their own work that I'm not as comfortable dealing with. And so I'm like, great, I'm happy to sort of help you get started. Let me help you take the first couple of steps. I'm generous in that way. And I know I can handle that in those things. And then like, okay, this is as far as I take you. Here are some other folks that are really good at sort of step 3 and step 4 and step 5. You might want to talk with them. Obviously, if you are truly invested in this, you're going to do the work on your own. But I'm happy to sort of help coach you and guide you in the beginning. And then I'm going to go back to my space. I line that up in the beginning, happy to help you for a little while on these things. And then hopefully I have some teammates, friends who are more comfortable at sort of step 3, 4, and 5, or step 7, 8, 9, or whatever it might be. So I don't have to like burden myself with that person's personal journey beyond what I'm comfortable with.
Thank you for that, Cheryl. You all can hear me okay now?
Yeah.
All right. Well, so our second question is about philanthropy. And Catherine, because of your role in launching the Equality Fund, I'd like to turn to you first. But James, you mentioned philanthropy earlier in one of your messages as well. So be prepared to come with a follow-up as well. Curious about how you think philanthropy needs to change to do a more full embrace of LGBTQIA folks and lift up their voices.
Yeah, there's a lot to do. And obviously, as I mentioned in my opening, a founding incorporator of the Horizons Foundation, it was called the GGBA Foundation, and because it was the Golden Gate Business Association that started it. And then over time, it came out of the business and became Horizons unto itself, the oldest, queer foundation around. The fact that it took Boston so damn long to get something should tell you a lot about what I think, is it Carly? Yeah, that's basically saying change is not coming perhaps as fast as we would like. And so when I was on the board of the Boston Foundation, it was important for me before I left to fight for it. And I worked for it on the inside, and my colleague and friend Scott Squillace was on the outside. And so it worked, right? And part of what it was to be able to prove to the Boston Foundation that everybody needed access. And I'll give you an example. I would sit in board meetings and we would talk about serving youth. Okay, we would talk about serving Black and brown youth. Did we serve any other youth? I mean, I would ask this question: do we serve young Asian youth? Do we serve trans youth? Do we serve gay youth? Do we serve Black gay youth? Do we, and the question was just like, if we serve youth, then we serve anybody that's in need. And that was really one of the catalysts for the board to shift and to be welcoming. But I think in a specific answer for Carly, that those that have the money have to stop holding the money and have to share the treasure called money, and to learn from those who need the money. And that's just a piece around how to bring those voices either into decision making and or to teach those that have resources to be able to expand their capability or understanding. And trans youth was one of the things that really, the Quality Fund, we brought some organizations in, sat down and said and talked to us. And that was a huge change. And I would say to you that still the Equality Fund, the two major categories that are coming for requests are trans youth of any shape, kind, culture, location, need, and elders. Mm-hmm. So these are the predominant ones that are coming in. And I think the other thing we have to do is make the process less cumbersome. Do we really need to have 15 pages in the application? Could we just have one? Mm-hmm. Could we just have a single page and try it? We're not talking about significant dollars here. We're talking about how 500, 5,000 makes a huge difference in these organizations. And so I think there's a dual relationship here. I think the decision makers have to get out of their own way and listen and help. I also think that folks need to be at the table. That's an important thing, and that's something that has been a challenge even for us at the Equality Fund, to make sure communities of color, to make sure that there's representation, make sure that there's perspective. I'll leave you with, when we first started, we had a 17-year-old, a senior in high school, was on our original advisory board. And she would say, I don't really know that I know everything about this, but I can tell you, can we just get pizza and a blackboard with some chalk into these support groups in high schools? Because it would make a really big difference. And we're like, how much do you need for pizza and a chalkboard? And she's like $500 for the year would be awesome. And you're sitting there going, you're trying to figure out $25,000 for this research. And you said, we all went there and went, okay, thank you, Stephanie, $500 to any ally group that needs pizza and a chalkboard. We're going to be there for you. Or a whiteboard. See, there's my age, a whiteboard. So I'll stop there.
Oh, thank you, Catherine. James.
To add, I just ditto everything Catherine said. But to add, I would say that, I just think we got to be honest with philanthropy and these foundations. The money is not theirs. It was never theirs. They shouldn't be asking us to apply for it. We shouldn't have to report on it constantly. And they need to let go of these arbitrary timelines on when we spend our money. And so I think for me, it's we just need to be really honest about what's happening. And I don't know, just change how we're operating around this money. And I think, ultimately, I think what I'm trying to say is that I think we need to just like honor the agency and the decision making rights of the community, and like build out processes to get that right. Like, not to plug Ujima, but we do have participatory practices that offer an opportunity for community to make big decisions, right? And so I think what we need to continue to move toward is like stop giving these foundations the opportunity to determine like whether or not we need the opportunity to determine how much money we need and the money and like where our money goes. It's like I don't think it's their call. It's their they don't have the insight and the authority to really inform the development of our communities. And I think that philanthropy needs to do a better job of like learning how to be in partnership with communities in a more participatory way and have a bit more imagination on like how to do that. And it isn't just like offering directives. And so I think that's sort of what I think will be most helpful.
Terrific. Well, we just got a couple more minutes left, and I want to ask a question that might be a sort of maybe a little bit on the lighter side, if you will, which is one piece of advice you would tell your younger self, your earlier self, maybe that you wish you had known when you very, very began the journey that you all acknowledged you started at different parts of your lives on. And why don't we start with, we'll start with Cheryl, we'll go to Catherine, and then to James to wrap it up.
Mm-hmm. Moisturize early.
Sorry.
People love you for who you are, and just believe them when they love you and have courage to take them up on that.
Yeah, I would echo that, for me, that the love, the original impetus to be who I was someone I loved. And I would say that while, I moved on from that, 17, 18, when I was 17 or 18 years old relationship, it's long gone. It was totally worth the risk, and it was totally worth the learning. And that as we create lives for ourselves, to be authentic is to me, one of the most important things. And sometimes that means moving on or losing someone, and having to deal with a situation. But stay authentic. It's so important to stay authentic.
Yeah, I would say one, like, you probably have everything you need. And then two, like get comfortable with being wrong, and like be comfortable with like that's okay. Like, leaders are wrong. I think for me, and I think that's imposter syndrome is a thing. I'm always a little critical of it because I think it's more about the system we're in. Like, they're making us feel this way. I don't think it's always inherently individual, but I feel like reminding myself that like you got it and like you don't need more. I think I really struggled at times with feeling like leadership meant perfectionists, like being perfect and being someone that knows it all, that's an expert, and I think that to just lean into what you know and just like honor and like love that and like speak with authority around that, it's like really important. You're just more authentic. And then also, darn, what was my second point?
No, that was pretty awesome. So,
there was a
you
one I had.
got the second one, I want to hear it.
I said it earlier. I just forgot what I said. But yeah, I feel like you have it all. Oh yeah, and you don't. You're wrong sometimes, and I think for me, I've learned that's cool. That's like and have people around you that can like steer you in the right direction. But like I think being comfortable with that is really important.
Well, James, thank you for that. I think that's actually a really great message to finish up on, and that we all have learned a tremendous amount today. I know I have, and I'm sure others that are watching, and we have so much learning left to do. And I just want to say just an incredible thanks to Catherine, to James, to Cheryl, to Marty and Tammi, who had to leave us a little early. Despite some of the technical challenges, this was an incredibly wonderful time together, and I just can't say enough thanks to our panelists and to everyone that joined us today, and on this entire journey that United Way continues to be on. If you're interested in our United Way, United for Justice journey, you can go to unitedwaymassbay.org/United for Justice for more information about what we've been up to and what is to come. I'd like to thank our presenting sponsor of the United for Justice series, Bank of America, for supporting this. And lastly, in keeping with the tradition of closing out these webinars with a quote, I'd like to leave you with this quote from Anthony Van Brown. It reads that the richness, beauty, and depths of love can only be fully experienced in a climate of complete openness, honesty, and vulnerability. I want to thank everyone who joined us today. Because of your openness, your honesty, your vulnerability, we experienced incredible richness, beauty, and love today. And I wish that of all of you for the summer and year ahead. Thank you.